You saw Gavin Newsom do it. You've seen Seth Moulton do it. Are you going to consider somebody an ally if they're for trans rights but don't want to see trans women competing in women's sports? Is that person an ally to you or not?
Well, I think two things I would say. First, I think there's a different question about whether someone says that there is nuance in this conversation, that there are legitimate questions, and someone who's trying to ban all trans people from extracurricular programs, regardless of age, regardless of sport.
The competition conversation specific when it comes to should this be in this specific, you're willing to have that conversation, not the all trans people are out type of.
I think it is an entirely reasonable position for someone to say that there are very understandable concerns about how to balance fairness and respect in sports. And the entities that are best able to grapple with those questions are individual athletic associations that best understand their sport and the science and the data. I think that's an entirely reasonable position. And that is, I think, a position that even for folks who are more conservative on this question, voters who are more conservative on this question, they can understand that we've got serious problems as a country. And even if you have a concern about that issue, that is it really the right place for that issue to not only be handled in, but for time and energy to be spent on? Is the U.S. House of Representatives really the right space for that to happen? And I think most voters can get behind that perspective on this issue. But what I will say is, beyond sort of the specifics of that, I do think we have to move past a purity politics. I do think we have to move past a place where the only way to be considered an ally is to be perfect on every issue. The reality is that if you want to defend trans rights in non-discrimination protections writ large, from a clear effort by right-wing politicians to legalize discrimination in all of its forms, if you want to build a coalition that's 51%, or frankly, more necessarily 60 or 70%, by definition, you will have to include people who are in the 70% who oppose trans people participating in sports consistent with their gender identity. That is the reality of the math. And I'm here to welcome imperfect allies. I'm here to say, you want to side with dignity and fairness. You want to side with being kind. You might have disagreements on particular aspects of how that looks and what are the right specific policies. But generally speaking, you want to do right by your neighbors who are across the diversity of gender in our society. Welcome to our coalition. Welcome to our party. I am not going to shed imperfect allies, because that'll get us a great, morally pure, miserable club at the gulag we've all been sent off to.
Are you worried about backlash in your own community, in the trans community, that says you're not fighting hard enough? Don't compromise our rights. Don't compromise our values.
Yeah, I mean, I
know I'm putting you in the proverbial box here, but look, a lot of people, I heard it. You accepted the Speaker of the House's decision on the bathroom.
Yeah,
you didn't fight it, and I thought your explanation in the movie was frankly a correct fear, which is if you fought it, if you protested, they might have expelled you.
Yeah. Or someone could have committed violence against me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a notable person. There could have been a bounty on my head. I'm not compromising on my own existence. I'm not compromising on the principle of equal rights. But people also have to recognize that there's a principle of harm reduction, and that liberal democracy sadly requires compromise. Absolutism.
Look, we wouldn't have gotten same-sex marriage if we didn't have civil unions first.
That's correct. That's correct. And I think the sort of, you can't compromise on human rights, that is a great principle to fight for, or ideal to fight for. My
whole life has been I've watched incremental progress on civil rights.
Tell me
compromise, right?
Tell me which civil rights act delivered full equality for people of color and had absolutely no compromise. The Civil Rights Act of 1957, the Civil Rights Act of 1960,
Right.
the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act of 1968, or any of the civil rights acts that have passed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Every single social movement has been disciplined, strategic, effective, picked their battles, and yes, made compromises. That doesn't mean that that's our starting point. It doesn't mean that that's what we fight for in the long run. But at the end of the day, progress is essential to progressivism. We have to move the ball forward. And we are not in this moment. We are not in this moment because of trans folks or our community, but we are also not in this moment because we weren't canceling people enough, correcting people enough, shaming people enough, or not fighting for the ideal.
Your level of concern that trans people will be scapegoated by the Democratic Party over the next 2 years out of desperation to win to win elections. I asked Chase this question, and I got the sense that he's a little nervous about it, but he said, "Oh, ask her."
Yeah, I'm confident that our party is committed to equal rights. I am confident our party is going to continue to engage in an approach to politics and change making that maximizes positive outcomes and minimizes risk for the vulnerable people that we are fighting for. I just heard Leader Jeffries and Leader Schumer last night very proudly and very clearly defend LGBTQ people and say that we are committed to trans rights. I'm not worried about people throwing trans people under the bus within the Democratic Party. I also think that we have to separate words and rhetoric from specific votes and recognize that if we can't even accept some diversity of thought in the messaging that we use, then we've lost the plot. We have become so consumed with language that we have forgotten that the people who we are fighting for, not the folks on social media, frankly, not the folks who are living in pretty darn good environments in deep blue areas where they're surrounded by people that are like them, but the LGBTQ person in deep red Iowa or the trans young person in a rural community. They need tangible progress. They don't need us prioritizing battles over what is the right language and message that we use and how we reach people. They have to do it every single day. They have to interact with people and engage with people and meet people every single day who aren't yet on our side. I think they need a degree of radical and urgent pragmatism in how we move the ball forward and how we stave off these fights. We've got to recognize the reality of political power in this moment, and we've got to recognize the reality of public opinion in this moment. Otherwise, we will only see a further regression in both public opinion and in public policy on these issues.